Hello viewer, and welcome to episode 7 of Sketchy Stories. I'll be going through my Berserk fan art today. Full disclosure before we begin, you should know that the creator of Berserk, Kentaro Miura, has sadly passed away at the time of this video. May he rest in peace. To pay my respects, I'll do what I can to pass on the legacy of Berserk, and if it makes you feel better, there are artists much better than me and more famous than me that are keeping Berserk alive. So you should definitely go check them out as well. And of course, also to let you know, spoiler warning for Berserk, and let's get to it. With all the blood, gore and adult themes presented in the story of Berserk, Miura still managed to weave in slivers of hope throughout the story. We first follow the main character Guts, who has been given the nickname the Black Swordsman, where he hunts down and kills these demons or monsters referred to as apostles. At this time in his life, he is on a relentless warpath against all apostles and doesn't care if innocent bystanders get hurt in the process. Read the manga to see the events that unfold. We get to a point that Guts fights an apostle called the Count, and he manages to take him down, for the count, with help from an elf friend named Puck. This apostle uses an artifact called the Behelit, spelt Behelit, which you can look up for more details, and he uses it to summon the God Hand for help. To oversimplify, God Hands are pretty much super apostles. As a note, a Behelit is an artifact that turns humans into apostles after they sacrifice a loved one. So anyway, Guts recognizes one of the God Hands and attacks him out of revenge, but fails. Here, the God Hands then give the Count an ultimatum. Sacrifice his daughter so he can live on as an apostle. The Count refuses though, and kinda literally goes to hell. His daughter, Theresia, learns that his dad, the Count, became an apostle after using the Behelit to sacrifice her mother, his wife. Understandably traumatized, Theresia vows revenge against Guts for killing the Count and having learnt about her mother's death. There's also this thing about Guts using her as a hostage to kill the Count as well. Anyway, Guts accepts Theresia's vow of revenge, but as he walks off, we see that Guts starts crying. Now, this right there shows there's still hope or humanity for Guts, and given how Guts had previously presented himself, him crying was completely unexpected, and the reason he cries becomes clearer as Guts' past is revealed. It's been revealed Guts' birth to childhood was very rough, to say the least. There's definitely a lot of gore and traumatizing stuff there. Don't think I can talk about it, so definitely read the manga for more details. I can comfortably summarize that Guts was raised as a mercenary, and throughout his adventures, he eventually gets recruited into the Band of the Hawk mercenary group, headed by Griffith. Fortunately, over time, Guts actually forms a familial bond with all the fellow mercenaries in the Band of the Hawk, where he grows to care for them. And he also, in his time, becomes a much more skilled swordsman, gaining a fierce reputation as the 100-man killer. Eventually, Guts decides to leave the Hawk, pretty much to find himself, and Griffith, unhappy about it, duels him for Guts' freedom. Guts wins the duel and with his newfound freedom, sets off on his gap year. Now, this event is a pivotal moment. Not only is it the inspiration for my fan art, but it sets off a series of events that lead to a big tragedy. Griffith undergoes a downward spiral after his loss. Stuff happens where he ends up getting tortured for a year. You can read the manga for more information. And more stuff happens where Guts reunites with the Hawk and eventually rescues Griffith. It becomes clear though, Griffith is permanently injured from his torture, and as a result, he pretty much tries to kill himself. But there's a stroke of luck where Griffith finds a special behelit and uses it. Now remember that the behelit requires you sacrifice someone? Well, Griffith's special behelit allows you to turn into a god hand. So instead of just sacrificing a loved one, if I remember correctly, it requires you sacrifice everyone you love, or at least that is present with you. So Griffith decides to sacrifice the whole band of the Hawk present, Guts included, to become a god hand named Femto. So lots of gory, nasty stuff ensues, where Guts and Casca become the only survivors, but are now marked with the brand that attracts apostles. Now I'm skipping out a lot of details here. I definitely want you to check out the manga, if this interests you, of course, for the full story. But anyway, after this event unfolds, which is known as the Day of the Eclipse, Guts begins his war path against apostles and starts to seek revenge against Griffith, thus beginning the Black Swordsman arc. Given Guts' past, we can sort of get a clearer idea of why he was crying after Theresia swore revenge on him. So I believe there are a few factors that contributed to this. The first being that the Count, an apostle, still showed some semblance of humanity, refusing to sacrifice his daughter. And in contrast, Guts had indiscriminately, although mostly justifiably, killed apostles without any sort of remorse. Next, after Guts failed to kill the God Hand, which you may have guessed is Griffith reincarnated, he knew at this current moment there was no way he could kill Griffith with his power. This revelation, along with Theresia swearing vengeance, showed Guts that he had become just like Griffith, who, put simply, sacrificed innocents for their own selfish gain. His legacy would be repeating the same cycle of self-destruction that Griffith had inflicted on him earlier. Of course, this is just my take on it. You can read the whole manga to make your own judgment. For clarity, I am recommending that you just read the Berserk manga, which has the full story. If you want, you can check out the 1997 anime or the 2012 Berserk 3-part movie, which both cover the Golden Age arc, which is pretty much Guts' time in the Band of the Hawk. If you absolutely want to, you can check out the 2016 Berserk anime. I haven't watched it, so I can't recommend it. And as a note, it is mostly negatively received by Berserk fans. That is the 2016 anime. Well, I've spilled my guts enough on my inspiration. Time for the inking process. My unique flair was to convey the whole duel between Guts and Griffith in a single panel. Luckily for me, that particular duel was over in one sword swing, where Guts broke Griffith's sword, as shown in the fan art as well. If you notice the jagged end of the broken off blade, and the blade at the hilt they don't match. And this was because the broken off blade, to me at least, didn't look jagged enough when I drew in 3 jags. So anyway, I added in an extra pointy bit to make it look more jagged. To add extra drama in the scene, I intentionally had Griffith in an exaggerated, dumbfounded face, with him looking at the broken blade to emphasize his shock and horror at what just happened. In hindsight, I feel I drew Griffith's face and neck a bit too thick, and of course no detailing in the ears, but at least it still looks like Griffith to me. I drew Griffith wearing a standard sweatshirt only because it was easier for me to draw, but I reckon it still sort of fits his style. And speaking of style, I also had Griffith wielding a sword with a fancy looking guard, as you know, he's a fashionable guy, so I reckon he'd also have a fashionable sword. As for Guts, I drew him in basic armor, a standard metal breastplate, and the laminated shoulder pads. I made sure he used a simple looking and big sword, since Guts gives off big sword energy. And yeah, looking at Guts' arms, I realize now that both the hands and forearms are not proportioned the same, but at least it looks like he's holding a two-handed sword properly, to me at least. Anyway, Guts' facial expression was meant to be stoic but still focused on the duel, and also ignore any, or lack thereof, details on Guts' ears. I'm sure you've gone berserk from me mentioning it all the time. I can promise it gets better, then worse, then better later on. So anyway, Guts' face and attire were meant to contrast against Griffith's, where I was trying to imply Guts was fully prepared to battle, walking into the duel, whereas Griffith was just casually walking into the duel, almost overconfident that he would win, but of course didn't turn out that way. And for the background, I went with a simple grass plains. In the manga, the duel was taking place in a snowy forest, but I wanted to keep things simple and was kind of lazy in adding a snow cover, and 2, wanted Guts and Griffith to be the main focus of the fan art. The original slogan had the question, how did Griffith feel when he lost to Guts? With the answer, he was gutted. Apart from being wordy, the main issue I feel was having the punchline in the question. So I changed it to sound like a PSA or public service announcement. So now it was, PSA, don't go berserk when you've been gutted. And I got a good 2 for pun deal here. So yeah, I'm happy with it. Overall, I think it's a decent bit of fan art, a bit too cartoony in the context of Berserk. Could be improved a bit, a lot more if it's to look as good as Miura's work. But yeah, I'll just stake it as a job medium done. Well, that's it for this episode. Hope my ramblings were entertaining. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next vid.